Hello and welcome to another episode of the Spotlight series presented by the Black Podcasters Association, powered by Afros and Audio. This series is where we shine a spotlight on a Black podcast creative or professional within the podcast industry. My name is Corey Gums, and I am the founder as well as your host. Before we introduce our guest for today, please make sure you like this episode, subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to tap the notification bell so that you can stay up to date with our newest content. And lastly, if you would like to learn more about the Black Podcasters Association or to become a member, you can go to our website at blackpodcastersassociation.com. That's HTTPS, blackpodcastersassociation.com. Today, we would like to welcome Angela Hollowell, the host of the Honey and Hustle podcast. Angela is the founder of Ange H Studio. I don't know if I pronounced that right. A
You
creative
did.
digital media agency designed for social impact, as well as a visual storyteller where her work features stories within community centered perspectives to promote environmental justice and human rights. Thank you, Angela. I'm happy to have you here. Glad to meet you. I know we're Twitter friends. um,
Yeah, yeah,
Glad
yeah. Thank you so much for
um,
having me.
talk face to face and get a chance to learn what you're about. So typically we jump right in, and one of the first questions I like to ask everybody that comes on the show is, "Who are you, and how did you get into podcasting?"
Who am I is a very deep and complex question, but I'll say how I got into podcasting. So, as you've already said, I am the host of Honey and Hustle, which is a video podcast. And I guess I kind of got into it by accident. I was already kind of creating videos for YouTube, but I really felt like I wanted to do something where I could connect early stage entrepreneurs and creators to people who are already doing it full time. I really felt like I um, excelled in my career as an entrepreneur when I moved to North Carolina just because I had so many resources and so many people that I can ask for advice and for their experience doing certain things. And really just having that community of people that was, really community oriented, really. Just with a mindset of helping other people grow. Like when we all grow, we all benefit. And I was like, well, I really don't want this to just be because I live here. Like I want everybody to be able to benefit from this. And coming from rural Alabama, I just knew that those opportunities just weren't there. And I'm sure there's other places in America that can probably relate to that. They really just don't have people in their community they can go and ask questions to or learn from or that sort of thing. And so that's kind of where the idea for Honey and Hustle came from, was just to like put people from different industries that were full time working for themselves, and put them in the forefront, kind of share their experience, what worked for them, how they got into it, because everybody's journey is different, and what works for everybody may not work for some people. And then just kind of share their area of expertise. So why they were able to carve out a space for themselves. And ultimately that does come from knowing yourself. So I guess asking me who I am is a very good question because that's who I ask other people about. Like, how did you come to be what we know you as today? So yes, that was just kind of the goal.
All right, that's dope. And I know we were talking earlier. You started your 2 year anniversary, so congratulations. Especially in this podcasting space, that's a big milestone to hit. Um, you started right, but like I guess around the time the pandemic started. Was that an idea that you just said, "Hey, you know what? I have this. The pandemic happened. This is an opportunity for me to take advantage of this," or was it something that was already in the works and it just happened to be coincidental?
Yeah, it was definitely a pandemic podcast. I was like, yo, I spend an hour each day round trip commuting. Like, I'm gonna put that time towards something else
Mm.
that could benefit me. And so I put that time towards YouTube and the podcast. And so that's kind of how I chose to spend that time.
Okay, that's dope. What? Uh, because you named it Honey and Hustle. So one thing I want to understand is what does that mean? But I also want to the people who are watching to know what is it about? What is the goal of Honey and Hustle, the podcast?
Yeah, so the way Honey and Hustle came about, so I am a very visual person. I do photography, I do filmmaking, but I'm not a designer. But I get really inspired by design, like really good design. I can't explain it, I just love it. I know a good design when I see it. And I saw something on Instagram where it was like an H, and on the top it had humble, and on the bottom it had hustle. And I was like, yo, I can switch that up to make it a little more badass, a little more feminine, but a little more inclusive too to all types of people. And so that's kind of how Honey and Hustle got its name. So the name came first and the concept came later. And the concept again was an interview-based video podcast, interviewing creators, entrepreneurs, nonprofit founders, which to me I do consider them business owners, and interviewing those people in the Raleigh Durham area and just kind of sharing their stories. So that was what Honey and Hustle came to be about.
Okay, was this because I know a lot of times, especially during that time period when you first started, was it hard for you to get guests? Was it hard for you to get people to come and join a newly formed show?
Well, yeah, nobody really asked me about the newness of the show. I think they were just excited that they could have a video asset to share for their business.
Mhm.
So I guess they were more so thinking about like what they could get out of it and just like their relationship with me, because these were all people that I knew or that
Okay.
were referred to me. So we had a mutual connection of some kind. But really, the hard part was just being able to do it safely. So season one, we did about 20 episodes in person, and that ended around August of 2020. And I kind of took a step back and I said, hey, it's just really not safe. I don't feel safe meeting in person. And I had other people from other areas that were interested in being on the show. And so that also gave me the chance to host people remotely. So season two, I hosted people remotely from all over the US and Canada on the show. And so that was a little bit safer and a little bit ease of access in terms of getting people on the show as well, because they didn't have to drive somewhere. They didn't have to figure out parking. They didn't have to really wonder about what they were going to wear from the waist down, because I wasn't going to see it anyway. So yeah, so it got better virtually, and there's definitely still some interest of people coming on virtually, but that just wasn't my original idea for the show. The show for me was really about the video production aspect and really elevating the quality of interviews and video interviews that are on in this space together. So I really wanted to get back to filming in person, and I've been doing that safely so far for the last couple months.
Okay, that's dope. Because I run my own mobile podcast studio out here in New York City, and one of the biggest questions I always get asked is, "Do you have video? Do you do video?" Um, I don't know if you ever experienced done the audio only type of podcast, but as far as the video goes, how do you um how do you go about for a podcast? I know even though a lot of people might argue that, oh, it's the same process as, I guess, filming a show or doing a scene. Does it differentiate? Is there a difference when filming a podcast episode versus filming something else, or is it the same process as far as trying to design and figure out how you want to go about it?
Yeah, so for me, some things that I've heard from people who are audio only and wanted to transition into video was, well, how do I create the same experience for the listener, right? No matter where they're listening. And so
Right.
that's something I had to grow into as a host and producer of the show. Was like, okay, I would start with going on and just saying, hey, this is my guest. Welcome to Honey and Hustle. Today we're talking about yada yada, and then go into the interview. But somebody listening only, because I do put it on streaming sites, they don't know who this person is. They can't see them. Like, you know what I mean? They have no idea what I'm talking about. So making it a little more audio forward. So like doing a trailer, a dedicated trailer for the video podcast, doing kind of like my own support ad read that goes in front of every episode to introduce it. That's saying like, hey, thank you so much for listening. If you like this episode, be sure to share it. Yada yada yada. We're gonna get into the episode now. So then they kind of know the flow, and it makes it a little bit better from an audio only standpoint. So I do think there is some consideration in terms of like thinking about it like, okay, this is a show, and whether somebody is watching or listening, I want them to have the same experience and kind of know what I mean, instead of just saying like, I'll put the link on the screen. Somebody can't, somebody listening can't see that. That's not a good experience for them. They're not going to know what to do. So kind of just making sure that things are compatible across platforms was definitely a big thing.
Yeah, I remember. I forgot, it was somebody in my group, in my community, was talking about it, and I can't remember. So sorry if you're watching. Sorry if I do it. Just shout me out in the comments or get at me in the group. But I remember they were saying, like, sometimes people, when they're doing video, tend to forget that they're going to take the audio portion and put it on, on their server, on their hosting service, that you have to be more descriptive. And when I was listening about, I was like, I've done a couple of. I try not to do the film part because it's just more work, and a lot of people can't afford it. But
Yeah.
um, I remember the one client I had that we did it, and I was like, we are gonna do the audio, and that was one thing we didn't do. We didn't talk about her when she was doing it being more descriptive so that it translates better in the audio part. what would be some recommendations you would give someone who's looking to transition or include video into their audio podcast?
Yeah, for sure. So one thing I'll say, especially for people who maybe are like clients like yours who are hiring someone to produce a show for them for their business or for their brand. Um, if you're a product-based business or a service-based business, and I've had to catch myself doing this too, like if you're holding something up, say what you're holding up because people listening have no idea what you're talking about. Or if you're presenting a product on the show, as descriptive as you can about the product itself so people who are listening kind of can visualize what you're talking about. So that would be number one. Two, like if you're pointing at something or pointing something out, say what you're pointing out. Just don't just kind of like, oh, I see you're wearing, um, or I see what you're wearing today and yada, yada, yada. And it's like, okay, well, what are they wearing? Are they wearing a brand t-shirt? Are they wearing something they just custom design? Are they a little dressed up? Are they dressed down? Like be more descriptive in terms of pointing things out that may be in the room that someone who is listening cannot see if they're not watching the video. Those would be the main two things. Another thing is sometimes when people are like, okay, I have to be on video, people are going to see me, they'll wear something really nice. So sometimes my suggestion would be just kind of like shake yourself out. And if anything is rattling, you might want to take that off because it's going to get in the audio as you start talking and moving around. See, you're already shaking your head. You're like, yeah, I know. So, like, yeah. So, just certain things just that may be fine for video and the way that you look and present yourself may not be, or your products may not translate super well to audio.
Yeah, I highly recommend that if you're doing audio also because I do editing and stuff, and it's such a nightmare to try to clean up and fix when something is rattling or you hear jewelry on their wrist or something like that. So that's great advice. I want to talk more about Honey and Hustle. How has the response been? Because I know you say it's your network locally where you're at, kind of, so right, and then you've expanded over the past 2 years. Um, how has the response been from your audience in regards to the episodes that you put out?
Honestly, it was a little overwhelming at first. So I started kind of posting things on Facebook directly. That's another thing, another mistake I made. I posted things to YouTube and to Facebook separately instead of just posting once to YouTube and then sharing it to Facebook. So my
Mhm.
initial viewership is a little bit split, but that's another conversation for another day. But because I was posting it on Facebook, it was because that was where a lot of my local connections were. So I was trying to reach, that audience. And there was a really good response from that. People were really excited. It was something different. They were seeing people that they knew, they were really interested. And that was great. But then trying to, as you grow and mature in your show and trying to make it more consistent and concise and more direct and targeted, all these lovely acronyms, trying to get people over to YouTube, which my crowd is skews a little bit older. And sometimes they're not really big into YouTube as they would be towards like Facebook or LinkedIn. So really trying to like get people onto the YouTube platform was a little bit difficult, and kind of get them from social media. So that was one thing. But overall, I think it's been great. We've grown. We're almost to 1,000 followers on Twitter. So if you haven't followed us yet, be sure to do that. But yeah, I mean, just the podcast community, the local community has been amazing. I've loved it.
Yeah, I saw you was doing that challenge, and I was like, "Oh man, I need to step my game up." I've been slowly building I got back into Twitter like last month, so I've been slowly building up our Twitter. As I'm learning how that platform works.
Okay.
Um, that's great. So, is it just you that produces the podcast, or do you have a team? How do you do about that part?
So this season's for season three, I do have an editing team that is helping me because my goal is to do 50 episodes this season. So
Oh,
that's a pretty big goal.
yeah,
And in addition to the other video production work that I do for myself during the day, I just would not be able to handle that type of workload on my own. So they are helping me with that. And I did rent out a co-working space, like a room in a co-working space to film. So those two things have been two big additions to help with the overall production quality and just consistency of the show for this season.
that's dope. So with the production value of your podcast, because I know a lot of people don't. One of the things I encounter with podcasters is the editing process, right? A lot of them feel like they don't need to edit. And from my personal opinion is that a lot of people don't say that because they can't afford to edit, but
Or they don't know how.
or they don't know how. Well, it's not an easy task. So, and it's
Yeah.
very time consuming, especially. And I just do audio, so I can imagine what video is with all the different angles and the different scenes footage you have to go through. So, um, How important to you is editing? Um, how I mean, I know you say I know you have a film background basically, but
Yeah.
how important is editing a podcast to you?
Very important. Yeah, very important. You know what I mean? Because it's like you can shoot the prettiest thing ever, but if you can't put it together in a way that's engaging that people want to respond to, that's where the film comes to life. And it's not just the video; it's audio too. I still edit the audio. I record into a Zoom audio recorder so that I have a nice, really pliable waveform that I can work with. And I use lav mics, and then I have, of course, the cinema camera that I shoot with. So yeah, color grading, editing, audio, all of it is very important to the quality of the show. I'm definitely not one of those people that just thinks. Even when I was doing it virtually, I still edited the audio and stuff and tried to make it and clean it up and things. So yeah, I think it's a little step that your audience will appreciate.
Okay. What was
Yeah.
so do you batch record, or how do you go about that process?
Yeah, so I started for season three. I did 2 weekends in February, 2 weekends in March, 1 week, 2 weekends in April, and then I'm taking a little break this month because I'll be traveling a lot. But yeah, that was what was helpful for me in terms of like all the gear that I was hauling to this co-working space. So like setting up all the gear, I didn't want to be coming back and forth doing that multiple times during the week. So I was like, let me just set aside some days that I'm just doing this. So I set up one time, break down one time. That's it. So
Yeah,
yeah.
that's something I'm still trying to learn how to master, because I'm like, okay, we're gonna be here today, all right, boom, and I'm not that trusting of leaving my my expensive equipment someplace yet,
Yeah.
especially if it's not my location. But
Oh,
that's dope. So what would you say was one of the best episodes that you really enjoyed making on your podcast, if
man,
there is
so
one?
many. So many. I would say I did one with my friend Ariel Smith, who's soon to be Dr. Ariel Smith. She runs a podcast called The Food Truck Scholar, so be sure to check her out. But I love food. I can't, I just can't say nothing about food. So food history. We talked about food trucks. Talked about food deserts, food accessibility. I love talking about stuff like that, and how she's kind of going at it from a different approach. And she doesn't own a food truck, but she talks to a lot of people that do, and she consults with people who are wanting to own a food truck and start a food truck business and create a menu and go into being a restaurateur in that sense, right?
Hmm.
So I love that. I love just hearing different approaches to entrepreneurship and things like that, especially in the food space. Because I mean, anything with food is good with me. Love a good food concept. So that probably just gushed over that a little bit too much. Maybe I'm hungry, but yeah. So I love that episode. I'm trying to think of another one from this season. So I did one with my friend um, Greg Hedgepath, who is now the communications director for North Carolina State Graduate School.
Okay.
But he also owns his own magazine called Substantial Magazine. And it is a paper magazine. And I think that's really different in this day and age, I guess you could say, because people really aren't, at least people I know, aren't really thinking about like, oh, what magazine am I going to pick up from the store today?
Right.
It's still a lot of things are very much virtual now, especially media and photography. So it's really cool to see print media, people trying to innovate within the print media space. Because I think there is something to that tangibility of being able to physically hold and read and view stories that way. So I'm excited to see where his company goes. But I think they're doing a lot of cool things to bridge that digital and physical print space. So yeah, if I had to say those two for sure, check those out.
Okay. How do you go about selecting a topic, or deciding, okay, I want to have this person on my show, or I want to talk about this particular subject, let me find someone who's in that space? How do you go about that process? Because I know it's important for people to hear how there's different ways of doing it. And I think when I've encountered people starting a podcast, they see what other people are doing and think that's the way they're supposed to do it. So I like to highlight how people find their way in producing their show.
Yeah, yeah. So for season three, and I guess pretty much every season, I think season one was a little bit more just like who do I know that I would like to have on the show whose work I admire and feel like is really inspiring. But season three and kind of season two was mostly referral based, so there was some of that, but there definitely was some vetting involved in that as well. So season three, I want to be a little more intentional since I was bringing it back to the triangle, and I came up with a guest list over time, just people that I was kind of loosely connected with or becoming familiar with through social media, through in-person connections. So there was like an initial list, and then I kind of looked at that list. Okay, so where are the gaps? What am I missing here? Like what voices or industries am I not including in these conversations? And so I kind of went from that angle and just reached out to my network and said, hey, do you know somebody who, is a music artist that would love to be on the show? Hey, do you know somebody who's in accounting that would love to be on the show and finance? Hey, do you know somebody who's kind of like an athlete that's doing their own thing and creating their own brand? So just trying to get different viewpoints of what it means to be an entrepreneur and what people are here in the triangle are doing to innovate in that space. So yeah, so that's kind of how I went about it. I definitely learned a lesson from season one about not vetting people that come on my show. Um, because it was I was filming, like I said, I started March 2020. Shortly after that, the George Floyd situation happened.
Yeah.
And so it's like, I want to be inclusive of multiple voices, but I'm also not going to provide a platform for people who are, um, how do I say this nicely, not community oriented in every sense of that word. So, yeah.
Okay. So I know you want to you so does the hut I know you do focus on like environmental justice, civil rights and stuff. Is that also what your podcast is about, or is that something completely separate that deals more with your
Yeah, it's separate in like the content that I create for uh NJ Studio and for the clients that I work with on there. But I would say that that ethos of and inclusion and diversity and all that that lives in me as a person. So that definitely influences who I have on my show and the platforms that I give people. Because the reality is, when you have a podcast, you have a platform. Whether that's audio only, whether that's video and audio, like you have a platform, and I want to be careful about the voices that I'm elevating as well. So, yeah.
okay. What was one of the most or what was one of the most painful lessons you learned since you started your podcast?
Oh, Jesus Christ. I would say one of the most painful lessons, and this is just coming from a person who doesn't like to receive 30,000 emails a day, is to treat it like a business. Give people an
Thank you.
expectation of give people an expectation of like when things are going to be available. So like sometimes people get really excited. I would record with them and the next day be like, okay, is the episode ready? And it's like, no, like it's not. So kind of having, and then I'm doing things weekly. So I think people would get discouraged about sharing if their episode went live a little too long after they recorded it with me. So the steam and the excitement was a little bit gone. So setting expectations about when your podcast episode was going to be live, um, what assets I was going to give you to be able to share it out and things like that. Um, just again, just setting expectations and ensuring that your guests as well as your audience have a good experience with you. So
Okay.
that was
I love the podcast as a business because I talk to people about that all day long. Even if you don't plan on making money and you just want this is just a hobby, you should still I believe you should still be actively looking to bring at least enough income in for it to pay for itself.
yeah,
But you should treat it as a business from the top to the bottom, whether you're vetting guests or you're doing your marketing and stuff like that. So
yeah.
we're there. So is it mainly just the where you're at that your guests come from? I know you said you have some people from Canada. Is it now more like you're starting to see more people from outside of North Carolina really starting to want to be on your show or want to be guests on your show?
Yeah, so like I said, season two was everywhere in the US from Canada and Canada. So we had about two or three guests from Canada and just people all around the US. So there was definitely that energy there, just diversity of voices and backgrounds. But yeah, but again, because people know that I have had people who weren't local to me on the show, they wanted that. And and it's been hard. I've had to say, hey, like I'm just not looking for remote guests right now. I'm trying to focus on this in-person recording, and I may pick it up because there is some interest there. But for right now, that's just kind of not the focus.
Okay. So if somebody wants to come on your show and they're in the area, they gotta fly in and, "Hey, what's up? I'm in town." Like,
I don't know if it's worth all that, but
"Hey, hey." That's so, so I know you said this season you're trying to do 50 episodes, which I think is amazing. I always commend anybody who I've had a couple of guests recently this season that said they've done more than 50 episodes for what they call a season.
Okay.
I know I did 26 my first season of this show last year, and I was like, "Whoa." So I don't know how you guys do it, but more power to you. Um, is that just like a personal challenge, or is just you feel like there's that you just have content you need to get out there because the previous seasons may not have been long enough or may not have had as much impact as you wanted them to have, or is it
I don't know. I think it's a mix of a couple things. One, I just truly believe that there are 50 voices here in Raleigh, Durham, Chapel Hill, and surrounding areas that are worthy of being highlighted. No, bar none, 1,000%. I definitely believe that, there are some stories that haven't been told yet in this area. So that's first and foremost. I don't think in terms of reaching that goal of 50, I'm gonna have a problem with that. The other part of it is, yeah, I think 50 is a lofty goal, but I think it's a good goal for me to have. Um, and I think I wanted to see what a longer season can do in terms of impact, going back to what you were saying. So my first season was about 20. My second season was 33, I believe. So it was 30 main episodes, 3 bonus. And I did something special for the bonus episodes. So be sure to check those out. But yeah, so for this one, it's kind of, I guess, a combination of season one, season two. Like, okay, I did 20, I did 30. Let's see if I can put those together and do 50 in person, which is, really I don't know. For most people, it'll probably be the best season yet. I feel like, at least for me too, because I have better gear now. I have lighting. I have a consistent space. That the audio is going to be so much better, than season one. Jesus Christ. So I think, I mean, like I'm a video forward person. I think that's a lot of video people struggle is the audio, and that just doesn't go with a video podcast because podcasts are audio based. So yeah, I just think everything from the visuals to the audio is just so much better this season, and just really looking forward to just elevating the guest experience and our place here in the triangle. I wanted Honey and Hustle to be more of a, I don't want to say household name, but a household name if I'm being generous. Yeah.
you do that, you're definitely gonna be a household name. I think you touched on something important, which is where you're at now in season 3 to where you were at season 1. And I know that's a big thing for a lot of podcasts, whether it's audio or video based. That's typically what I found inside the Black Podcast Association is the people are working towards growing and not being in the same space that they were when they first started. So whether we're having discussions about uh types of microphones or investing into to upgrading your microphone or your equipment, I think that's very important for people to hear. It's kind of like music, right? The first album, boom, you hit everybody. They're like, okay, this artist, but by the third album, the artist knows who they are. They drop the classics, you know. And I could say like one of my favorite bands, Outkast, right? We saw that with their first 3 albums. Then they dropped the Criminal, which was like their masterpiece, and was like, so I think you're gonna do well this season. We already know this, but
We already know. We already know. Yeah.
so, so how far along are you in season 3? Are you almost done recording or?
Yeah, I'm still recording. So I did three weekends of recording or 3 months of recording so far. So I've recorded 29 episodes. Tuesday we'll be releasing our 10th episode of the season because we started releasing March. I want to say March 1. That was a Tuesday. And then we've been doing it every Tuesday since. So we'll be at episode 10 this Tuesday. So yeah, it's 50 episodes. It's almost a year if I'm releasing them weekly. So we have a long way to go. But yeah, so I'm excited, and we're over halfway through in terms of recording. So I think this next 21 is gonna be good as well.
So I have a really important question because you're halfway through your recording. I'm gonna assume probably in the next month or two you probably be close to meeting your goal as far as recording goes. Is there going to be a break afterwards? Because I know that's a lot of work that you're doing. Because I think this is something. Burnout is real. It's part of
Yes.
what one of the things when I got into space, I wanted to understand pod fading. And burnout to me is one of those things where people get overwhelmed with their recording, life gets in the way, things happen. Sometimes even with this show, I've had to tell people, can we pre-record or can we reschedule because, days things just happen. Um, for you, is it okay? Let's take a break, and then you start the process for preparing for the next season. How do you go about, managing your recording schedule?
Yeah, that's a good question. So because we're so far ahead, like this month, May, I'm going to be taking a break from recording
Okay.
because we are so far ahead. And there are some people that I reached out to initially that were like, "Hey, this just isn't a good time. Can we reconvene during the summer? That would be a better time for me." So I think for a lot of people too, the timing will just be better if we start again June, July timeframe. So that's also kind of the thinking behind it. Um, but yeah, so I think because we're so far ahead and because I'm not doing the editing per se, so that is also taking out my time that I'm spending on the podcast. Um, I think like there's definitely going to be some space towards fall and the end of the year. Well, I'll just really just be like waiting on edited episodes from my video editors, and I can just kind of focus on marketing and really prepping for season 4, reviewing the stats from season 3, see what people are engaging with the most, seeing what workflows work best for me, the editors and the guest outreach and stuff like that. So really seeing like, okay, what are some gaps, what are some things we did well, what are some things I want to improve on, what are some things that we can implement in this next season. So yeah, there's definitely going to be a gap in terms of recording between now and season 4.
Okay. Like I said, it's very important that podcasters hear about, taking. I've had some people like I have to keep recording. They do it. I don't know how people do it weekly. I tried to do it myself, and I was like, "Okay, this is no good. This is no bueno." I'm
Yeah.
actually thinking like for the next season of the spotlight, even though we do live stream of actually doing portion of it pre-recorded and just spending a couple days in 1 month and just get that together. So
Yeah.
something I want to play around with, think about it, but I think it's important. I wanted to ask you too, about editing. So
Hmm.
you went from editing your own podcast to bringing in a team to help you edit. Um, what was that like for you? Was it just something you knew like, okay, season 3, I'm just gonna have to bring in somebody. I know I need to free up my time. This is a lot of work. How did you go about finding your editors, or was it somebody you already knew, or how did you go about that?
Yeah. So this is so outside the podcast. So Android Studio, I've been in business for about 5 years, officially a little over 5 years. But in terms of being full time, Android Studio, May this month actually makes 2 years. And so my business is drastically different now than when I started when I was, in grad school. Like,
Right.
like this is it. This is all that I do. I don't have a full time job. Or let me rephrase that. I don't have any other salary offer job that I do. Like this is it.
Right.
So the amount that I'm spending and dedicating to that business is kind of taken off as business is growing and things like that. And it's getting warmer out, so I have more shoots, more opportunities, and things like that. So I just knew, again, from a workload standpoint, me doing client work and focusing on the podcast, especially as much as I was recording, 29 episodes, like 50 episodes. That's just way too much for one person. So I did a shoot with a local production company. I needed an audio guy for a video project that I was working on. And he's like, hey, like me and my roommates have this production company. Obviously, we freelance outside that, but we do have a formed production company. If you ever need things, like, is it cool if I bring them out just kind of as productions assistants on set? You can meet them and get a feel for them and see, if you want to work with us on anything in the future. So, I was like, yeah, okay, cool. So they came out and I was able to meet like his friends and stuff. And later, as I was, doing pre-production for season 3, I thought of them. I was like, hey, let me just explore. Let me just see how much they would charge me like per episode and try to be as descriptive as I can so they can give me an accurate quote. And when they came back, I was like, yeah, okay, I think this is feasible. Like they're local. So that also helps with like file transfers because video files can be humongous. So, I didn't have to try to like upload that to the cloud and all this other stuff. Like I could just give them a drive and be like, hey, here you go. Yeah, I'll see
Um,
you in 2 weeks or something.
one
So,
of my video editors, he's in Argentina, so I know about that issue of
whew,
file uploads. I just
I
leave my
can't even.
computer on for like a day.
Yeah, I can't imagine just the sheer amount of time my computer would be on. But yeah, so I got to, and I think, for other people too that are like maybe they don't have somebody local, it can be a challenge because if you try to like, I don't know, find somebody on Fiverr or find somebody that that isn't local and you're trying to coordinate getting things to them, that can be a really big setback for a lot of people. And honestly, sometimes the hassle just isn't worth it. But Yeah, I think if you can find a way around that in a way that is cost effective and that works for you and you're getting the quality out of it, that definitely helps for sure.
Yeah. You know, because I know for a lot of podcasters too, is the creative side. You know, I'm because of your background, I'm going to assume that you understand the value of editing. So it's like when you decide I'm going to find an editor, you already know, have an idea, or have a view of like, okay, this is what I need to get done. What would be some advice you would give to someone who's watching this, who's thinking about getting an editor but is confused or doesn't feel confident in going about that process?
Yeah, so one thing I did before just hiring them outright was I gave them 3 episodes to kind of test to see if they could do what I needed. So one, it was an episode of me and just one other person, so pretty straightforward. The second one was me and 2 other people, so seeing how they would, kind of do the video angles and stuff like that with 2 people and handle audio editing for 3 people. And then the third one, this guest, I won't say names, but they kind of like would ramble on a bit and tell me personal information that I didn't want included. So
Hmm.
that was a really good test of their discretion. Like, do you know how to cut out things that don't add to the storyline and don't need to be public? I don't think they were ever meant to be public. Yeah, so kind of just testing their ability to edit with discretion and um, edit pretty consistently and stuff like that, gain a style and pick up on some things that I definitely wanted in terms of color grading, in terms of how I like my audio to sound, and then creating short clips that I could post on social media. So, how are they choosing clips? How effective are they? And I gave them certain parameters too. Like, I like to be able to post things natively onto Twitter, so nothing longer than 2 minutes, 20 seconds. Um, just that sort of thing. Focus more on the guest than you're focusing on me. Just see how well that they're meeting your needs. That would be my main thing, and just kind of give them a test. Like not every editor is going to work out, so don't be afraid if or discouraged if the first 1 or 2 don't work out. Just get better at communicating what it is that you need, so you can help set them up for success.
That's the I learned something right now. I didn't even know about the Twitter how many minutes to make it. So
Yeah,
you just
yeah,
you got little tips, guys.
yeah, yeah,
I really appreciate that. You know, what's interesting is, I've always wondered that, like, how people choose clips and how they do that. So it's really you kind of have an idea of what you want, and you just a good editor is going to be somebody who can use that discretion and say, hey, I think this would be a great clip, or this portion of what you were talking about I think would be great for marketing. Or is it that something that you decide for yourself? Because I've been trying to learn that balance with my clients.
yeah. It's a balance. So what one thing that I do, because as in video production, I guess like yes, I came at it from the cinematography point of view because I started as a photographer, so I really do care about
Mhm.
how things look, but I also care about the story. So that kind of gets me into that director producer bag. So one thing I'll do after every episode is I'll write down key topics that we talked about, like things that I thought were like really good, and then I'll even highlight, like I'll say clip, and then just what they were talking about that I really want that I think should be highlighted. So that's one thing I do for myself, and that I have passed on to my editors to kind of help them out as well. And then there are some where I don't know. I just have topics that we talked about that helps me write a better description for that episode, and then I kind of let them choose. So it can go either way, but that's just one thing I've done to kind of, because I mean, sometimes too, like I said, like I record for somebody in February, the episode may not come live until May, so that's a
Right.
long time to go without really remembering that conversation fresh. So having those written notes really helps. And if you have an idea of like that clip out of the gate that you want to share, write that down.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah.
So, let's talk about briefly about your business. I know this is we talk about your podcast, but I like to also let people know about what else you do. Let's talk about your studio and that. I mean, you briefly sprinkle things here and there. What do you do with your? I guess, is it a studio or is it a production company?
It's a production company, yeah. So right now I do a lot of client work, and I'm branching out into doing some original documentary films here soon. So be on the lookout for those. But a lot of it is focused on environmental justice, human rights, topics like health equity, like education, and things of that nature. So those are kind of things that permeate the work and the clients that I have currently that are coming out right now. So super excited about that. Um, but yeah, I mean, again, I think the long term goal for Android Studio and the name may change because I just named this off of a whim some years ago.
Yeah, let's-
Yeah, so, but the name, I want it to be less client focused at some point and more original content focused. So Honey and Hustle is already under Angie Studio legally. There's another um, idea that I have for a podcast, a video podcast series. I want to get into doing more docu-series work. I want my YouTube channel that isn't me making podcast videos to be kind of looped under that as well. So just a lot more original content, a lot more docu-series, short docu-films, maybe a documentary feature film one day. And just really a lot more community based around that. Because right now, the only community, I wouldn't say the only community, but a lot of the community that I have surrounding Angie Studio is based off the clients that I work with, right? And I want to have just a more inclusive space where we can not only create but uplift other creators of color who are doing incredible things in that space. So whether that's video podcasting, documentaries, that sort of thing.
That's dope. Now I know you have a newsletter, right?
Hmm.
That that's important to you. Can
It
you talk
is.
about that newsletter?
Yeah. Yeah. So the honey pot, I mean, the naming is timeless. It goes with honey and hustle. But I kind of designed it in a way that is kind of just this pot of gold for people who are interested in social media strategy, podcasting, video creating, and entrepreneurship. So I try to release it every 2 weeks. And it just comes with tons of gems that you can take away and apply to your own creative process and creative business. So if you're interested in that, be sure to check that out at angiestudio.com/subscribe.
All right, and I'll post up the when we get to that part where you tell everybody about your socials and stuff. I'll post up the website again, but I'm definitely going to add myself to that list because I need help. I'm still learning all this stuff, and that's the thing. What would advice would you give to a podcaster who's running the show by themselves? Because a lot of us are entrepreneurs, a lot of us are one man armies, one team person, one person teams and stuff like that. And I know you started that way. What would be some advice you would give to a podcaster that's on that journey right now?
Yeah, I would say like sometimes if you're a one person team, don't try to do everything. I think especially on Twitter, there's a lot of ways to success. One of those could be starting a newsletter. One of those could be starting your own community group on Facebook or Twitter or Discord or Slack, whatever. But the reality is you only have so much bandwidth. So don't try to spread yourself so thin thinking that it's going to increase your reach. But because if you can't stay consistent, then it's not going to help you in the long run. So I would say like if you're a one person team, focus on what you can do to begin with, and then as your capacity grows, as you're able to hire more people to outsource certain parts of the business that maybe you don't like, then you can increase your capacity, right? So that would just be my first thing. Like, don't try to keep up with the Joneses straight out of the gate if you know that your story is a little bit different. You also have to think about not just business or creative capacity, but also like lifestyle capacity. I'm single with no kids. Like, I have a lot more time than somebody who's married with 3 kids and 2 dogs and a guppy that's sick all the time. Like, you know what I'm saying? That's a different level of time
Mm.
commitment. You know what I mean? So I just be realistic. And people who maybe are dumping a lot of money into their podcast initially, but aren't seeing a return because maybe they have a spouse that's doing really well that can afford to take on, half the bills or all of the bills, or, maybe they have a full-time job that they allows them to feed more into their podcast hobby or business more so than you're able to. So like don't get caught up in that comparison game of like this is what I need to do to be successful because this is what this person did. Like focus on your own journey for sure.
Angela, I just want you to know you and I are like right here. Like we're like this. I mean, I have this conversation at least 3 times a day.
I swear. Swear.
But I really appreciate your perspective and the gems you drop. So what I like to ask all my guests and are these two questions. What does it mean for you to be a black woman in podcasting, video or audio, doesn't matter? And what does it mean for you to just be a black creative in this space? You can combine that answer together, but I like to point out the you being a woman in this space because it is a certain dynamic that I've learned since I've started this journey that it has a very unique journey for a lot of women in this space
Yeah.
as a woman and then also as a black woman in it. What does that mean for you?
Yeah, man. So I think the biggest lesson I've learned and that I try to take with me into every episode, every space that I occupy is like I am meant to be here. Like I am meant to occupy space. Like when I look around at the podcast landscape now, a lot of women podcasters that are doing well started off with a co-host, right? Because sometimes we as women are so afraid to like use our voice and take up space and be all that we are and show personality and really take charge of the vision that we have for our life. Like you got to lose that. And I definitely had to lose that for myself, like this fear of like, Or what if people don't, accept it or gravitate to it or all these other, who cares? I think as a Black woman, I think there's definitely an increasing eye on us. You know what I mean? When you look at Abbott Elementary by Quinta, when you look at Insecure by Issa Rae, when you look at the docu series and docu films that Ava DuVernay is putting out, Black women are doing amazing things in the creative space, right? So I think there's definitely space for all of us to kind of, I won't say ride their coattails, but benefit off of the positivity that Black women creators are getting right now, and be okay with the fact that you're not going to start off perfect. It's not going to be perfect, but it's yours and it's your vision to see through, and you owe it to yourself to do that. So that's what it feels like to me. It definitely feels like an honor to be even sharing the same earth as Issa Rae and others like her that are doing creative things, because they're the examples that I can do it too. You know what I mean? So
Mm.
that's where I'm feeling right now. I'm feeling blessed for sure.
Very soon you'll be up there with them too.
Yeah, I hope
I
so.
feel I trusted it.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
I'll keep it real. Like even the BPA, we wouldn't be where we're at without Black women. Even from me in this journey, started with the support of one Black woman, one of my best friends in the whole wide world. And she was the one that pushed me, and we wouldn't be here. That's one reason why I'm like in this. I've learned in this space. I'm starting to take the position that Black women move the podcasting space, especially for Black people. So that I think it's important that we hear these things and we talk about it, because a lot of times it gets swept under the rug or it doesn't get acknowledged
yeah,
in conversations. When you hear about the podcasting industry and people of color in their voices, we don't talk about that too much. We actually recently did a women's panel for Women's History Month with the ladies of BPA. So everybody's watching that, you can check that out. But I really appreciate you giving me your time and being here on the show. The most important part of the show is, how do people find you? How do they reach out to you? How do they find your show? How do they ask their questions or whatever they have of you? Um,
yeah. For sure. Just real quick here, I do want to shout out Leo and Kenny who have been hanging out with us.
oh yeah,
I think we're connected on Twitter as well. So thank you guys. And also, I just want to say that the biggest, I would say, like Black woman in podcasting doesn't even have a podcast, Pods in Color. She's incredible and she's invested into my show, and I'm sure invested into many others, and just giving away free gems all the time. So I appreciate people like her as well. But again, like I just said, I'm really active on Twitter. So you can find us on Twitter at Honey and Hustle. I'm on LinkedIn. I'll share episodes there as well. LinkedIn is just my name, Angela Hollowell, or you can find us, yeah, at Honey and Hustle on LinkedIn. And then YouTube. We're on YouTube,
don't have
www.youtube.com.
your YouTube.
It's okay. It's okay. It's just my name, Angela Hollowell. You can find I made a playlist with all the Honey and Hustle episodes. You can check that out. So
All right, and
yeah.
Twitter. Also on Facebook. We have you on Facebook as well.
I
And
don't really use Facebook, but it exists.
yeah,
It
it's
exists.
there.
Go out there.
I think we're all kind of slowly moving away from there. And I have you on
Yeah.
Instagram as well if anybody wants to check you out there. But
Yeah.
is there anything you wanna any advice, any last words you wanna give to anybody who may be watching?
Yeah, don't take people's advice. You just got, at some point it's like you just got to get out there and try. So keep trying, keep failing, keep trying to get 1%, 5%, 10% better with every episode. So that's just my advice. Just keep going.
Well, Angela, thank you again for being here. I'm glad to have you on the show. I was excited. I was waiting to meet you. I know you signed up, and I was like, okay. And I've been following you on Twitter and supporting you on there as well. I'm looking forward to the new season. I'm definitely going to try to check that out. Is that also that's on YouTube also?
Hmm.
And the audio, where can they listen to your podcast on audio?
Wherever you stream your show, yeah, we're on there. Spotify, Apple, Google, Amazon, iHeartRadio. I don't know who listens to podcasts on there, but we're on all the places.
Okay, so all the major platforms, all your favorite platforms, you can check out Honey and Hustle podcast. Again, we have Angela Hollowell. Thank you for being on the show. I look forward to seeing the growth of your podcast. Um, Thank you guys for checking out the Spotlight. Make sure you tune into our show right here on our YouTube channel, the Black Podcast Association, on Sundays at 7 p.m. Eastern. You don't want to miss it, so make sure you like it, tap the notification bell, subscribe to our channel, and to stay notified. You can also find us on all major social media platforms as well. And if you haven't become a member of the Black Podcast Association, stop doing it and go to the blackpodcastassociation.com. My name is Corey Gums. I have been your host, and have a good night. Again, Angela, thank you. And thank you to everybody who checked out the show tonight. We really appreciate you. So, everyone, enjoy the rest of your Sunday.